Hi, this is I'm the Jim Ruff Show, and I'm Jim Ruff, and I'm here today with Mary Zepernick from POCLAD, which is the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy. And so I'm really thrilled to have Mary here. She's from the Cape Cod area, where their organization has been in existence for 10 years?
About 9.
9 years. 9 years. So Mary, tell us a little bit. So how'd you get here? Did you fly?
I flew. I have friends in the Seattle area,
Okay.
so I'm doing some work and a lot of play.
Okay.
And I love this area, so it's a real pleasure to be here. I love your town. It's fun to poke around in, even in the rain. And I bring greetings from Cape Cod, from the other ocean.
Mary, tell us a little bit about your organization, POCLAD, and what kind of work that you do.
Well, people ask, what is a POCLAD? And it is the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy. We are 12 people from California to London, and we've been together, most of us, for the better part of 9 years. Our official mission statement is to instigate democratic conversations and actions that contest the authority of corporations to govern our nation, define our culture, and plunder the earth.
Wow.
Covers a lot of territory.
Yeah.
And we're interested in democracy and self-governance. So we began by looking at the institution of the corporation, because it seemed to us that was in the way, in a very big way. So we looked at history and some law and struggles that went before us, and we've learned a lot. And we put that out there. So we have a large mailing list, which people are very welcome to get on, and a website, POCLAD.org.
POCLAD.org. Yeah.
And we publish, we speak, we work with activist groups primarily in helping to figure out together. We don't have all the answers or any magic quick fix. How to reframe single-issue defensive struggles, which most of us know a great deal about, and some victories have happened. But how to reframe them more systemically so that we can get to the root and assert our rights of self-governance as we also address the toxic waste dump or the nuclear weapon or whatever issue it may be.
Okay, so you're saying that we are supposed to have a democracy.
That was the promise.
That was the promise.
I believed it for a while.
Yeah, and that we don't have that anymore because corporations are really in the way, and that we can't make good decisions about toxic waste dumps and so forth because of that.
In some measure, yes. I think a really interesting issue is whether we ever really did have it.
Oh.
So we don't talk about reclaiming something, some golden age, but rather creating or building. And it's a matter of degree, and it's debatable.
Yeah.
But we take a really hard look at the Constitution itself, both the document and the process by which it was written, and raise some questions about the mythology around it and the ways in which it has both to some degree enabled us to be self-governing, but also has gotten in the way, in a rather intentional way.
So tell us how do you know that there's a problem?
Well, I know that I don't have a choice of candidates who aren't beholden, especially on the federal level, to corporate interests, to wealthy, powerful interests. I know that I don't have, unlike other industrialized in many other countries, guaranteed health care as part of what society sees as our right.
And you see that as being the reason for that is the corporations block that.
I think that is a reason, definitely. As Jim Hightower puts it, I think this was his grandmother, says, you can't clean up the creek till you get the hogs out of it. But they're not the only problem by any means. I don't believe, it's a matter of getting to the point where we, the people, that ringing phrase, have the space and the processes, which you know something about and we can talk about, to make decisions about our governance from the local, state to the federal levels, and particularly locally. And this is where we encourage most people to work. It's where, you know, things happen that you have some access to. It's where the dumps are, or often wherever the problem is. But I don't believe that if we ever had it, I don't believe most of us still have a sense of entitlement. That word came to me at one point after reading a book on the Massachusetts Revolution of 1774, where the English Parliament withdrew the colonists' considerable measure of self-governance in retaliation for the Stamp Act or Townshend Act and Tea Party and the rebellion that was building. And the colonists, who were white males at that point, who had that kind of power, overthrew British rule in every colony or every place in Massachusetts, every county outside Boston, by nonviolent means, just blocking courthouse doors and forcing the resignations of court-appointed officials and so forth. It's a very interesting story. But what's important to me is that they felt entitled to whatever self-governance they had. And they did not take it kindly when it was removed. And I think we've lost that sense.
In other words, we have supposedly self-governance, but we don't seem to be rising in anger that we're losing it.
Exactly, or have lost it. And we can turn out on the 4th of July and wave the flag and put it on our bumper or whatever. But, you know, what does that mean if we really don't have the power together to make decisions that affect our communities?
So how did corporations get in charge? How did that happen?
It was gradual. Actually, people need to know if they don't. And I'm a former U.S. history teacher. I'm doing penance now for what I peddled many decades ago. Early in U.S. history, corporations were kept on a very short leash through state-issued charters. There still are state charters, but they have lost their enforcement power, their meaning, and so forth. There weren't very many corporations, and they were quite limited and told in their charter what they produced or did or maintained a turnpike, whatever, and all kinds of other conditions and limitations. And if they violated their charter, it was revoked. They were beyond their authority, that word authority. They didn't have the authority to exceed the people's limits. They were really a publicly created institution and subordinate to the public will. And we believe that's the way it should be. But when corporations became more numerous and wealthy and powerful in mid-19th century, during and after the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution, corporate operatives sought ways to slip those limits and bonds or bound conditions. And they sought to have the corporate form, it's a legal entity, a legal fiction, declared a person for purposes of the 14th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War for the protection of newly freed slaves. And that's the ringing amendment that that guarantees due process and equal protection of the laws to persons born or naturalized in the United States. And by no stretch ought a legal fiction, an economic entity created to serve the people, be a person under the law. But they achieved that finally. They
achieved that. So now we don't even think about it when a corporation says, hey, free speech, we should be able to donate to our local campaign on the basis of free speech.
Right.
And we don't even think about the fact that, wait a minute, it wasn't free speech given to people, not to corporate entities or economic entities.
Exactly.
And this shift, this sea shift to creating them with it, where now all of a sudden they're powerful and these persons have unlimited life.
Right. They don't die.
They don't die. And unlimited power.
They can grow more limbs.
And they
reproduce themselves.
Reproduce themselves. And so they're taking over it's really we the corporations instead of we the people.
Exactly. And your example is excellent, that they have free speech that's protected under our Bill of Rights, or Fourth Amendment protections against unwarranted search and seizure. That means if a health inspector, safety food inspector comes to a plant without warning, well, figure that out.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're objecting to the rights of the persons, the human beings, individuals within a corporation,
Right.
but the entity.
But the entity itself.
And
then
it's just outrageous.
It's outrageous. And then the people within the organization actually are losing their rights because the corporate entity denies them the right of privacy and denies them the right of various, so the people are actually losing their rights within the corporation. So it's an odd thing where we're bowing to the corporate, and really it is a bowing to the corporate process. And you mentioned also that the corporations are stealing our culture. Maybe you could say something about that.
Well, from one point of view, we have become consumers far more than citizens. And even activists have become more and more conditioned to something like a boycott. And it's not that that's bad or wrong or never has any use, but that doesn't change the power structure.
Right.
Doesn't address the inappropriate power and the rights and protections the corporation at issue has. And Cornel West, African-American writer and professor, has said that our minds are so colonized that we can scarcely imagine what real democracy would look like. That just struck me when I heard it. And I think it's everything from advertising, which everybody's affected by, whether we think we are or not, in all media and billboards and stadiums, and everything's now named after Acme Corporation or whatever, whoever gives the money. Channel 1, who has a captive audience of thousands and thousands of U.S. students in classrooms. That includes, I forget the number of hours a year of advertising, and how children are manipulated to want this and want that, and go to their parents. And I think we're colonized in terms of a vision of being able to live together and on the earth in more sustainable, cooperative, nonviolent ways. And I hear people say, oh, you're right, but it's always been this way, it's human nature, it won't change. I don't believe that.
It's not human nature.
It's not human nature.
We've become elements of the corporate beast that's creating us.
Right. And certainly I know enough about your project with wisdom councils to know that you've experienced and help others experience ways of coming together quite differently from the adversarial political, economic, legal system we're used to.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that I see you leaning to this idea of, first of all, saying that Cornel West, his quote, it's a wonderful quote, how we can't even imagine it, and I think of the Wisdom Council as being a way to imagine it.
Live it.
Because people have just, when they, in our recent experience in the Rogue Valley, for instance, the people who were in the audience watching this randomly selected group just kind of slapped their heads and went, wow, this could really happen. And many of them signed up to want to help, and these are just people from the community. So, and practically every person that we randomly selected now wants to help for the next one. And these are randomly selected people. So
that's exciting.
So it really
it really is. And so you have both helped facilitate, enable, and experienced people coming together in a different way. I think we're hungry for that.
Hungry, yes.
I think, sometimes there's maybe a bit of a nostalgia or mystique around times like the Depression, not the privation, not the grinding poverty, but the stories that I heard my folks tell about how we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We managed to eat and that was it. But we sat around and played cards and talked in the evening. And,
yes. Really community, a spirit of community.
Communities. And I think that may be overdone, but any of us, and I'm one of them, who's experienced a real community.
Yes.
And a community of struggle together. Just hungry to live that way.
Yes, and I think it's possible. I think that you're absolutely, I mean, in my view, that you're absolutely right that we've been colonized and that we don't remember what it's like to be that way. We kind of have it driven out of us. I know that when I want to make money, I have to serve the corporate beast. I mean, I have to. And everybody, I think, is in that same boat. If I want to serve society, I won't get paid. You and I both.
It's very difficult
We've
to make a living trying to change
or even
society.
to serve society.
You can serve people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you
in a
can serve individuals.
You
but
can
to
bind
serve,
the wounds.
Yes. Yeah, bind the
try
wounds.
to change the power structure, power relations, and that gets real tough.
Right.
Even foundations
Yes.
who purport to fund social change, and I can attest to this very personally, will say, gee, you're doing good work, but you're not a fit.
Yeah.
And that's part of the colonization. We have this single issue mentality rather than being able to look at a whole and analyze.
Well, I've found that true going to corporations. They have certain categories that they'll fund, but if you have an answer that addresses all categories, that's out. If you have a solution that's too big, that would solve too many problems at once and cost far less, well, that doesn't fit our categories. So it's really a struggle.
It's an exciting time, though, to do this work,
is.
even in 9 years, which isn't all that much at all in historical terms. There's been quite a heartening, encouraging growth in awareness of the issues of corporate power, lack of democracy. Certainly the Bush administration is doing its utmost to help us be aware that we don't have a democracy, that we weren't consulted on these issues, from war to the so-called fight on terrorism, to the assaults on civil liberties in the name of it, any of that. I mean, we're just not consulted.
And it's also nonpartisan. I mean, to strike a nonpartisan chord, I don't think it matters who's in position because, like you said earlier, everyone is beholden to the corporate structure. So.
This is a bipartisan lack of democracy, definitely.
Yes.
Even the two-party system itself.
Yeah. So it's a struggle to what do you think, from your understanding of the situation, what are some of the things that you see as possibilities for us breaking out of this?
Well, again, we think that right where you're living and experiencing whatever problems, and they may not all be around corporations, is where we need to most assert our self-governance, where we have the most opportunity to, with locally elected officials and so forth. So things are happening at that level. Well, even the Patriot Act, well over 200 resolutions in cities, couple states, communities all over the country, refusing to enforce the Patriot Act. What we believe is important is that some of those become binding. So as long as they're expressions of the will of the people, resolutions, that's important. It's an educating tool, it's a message, it can spread. Binding ordinances on the local level, however, are just incredibly powerful. And I think you know something about what's happening in Pennsylvania, where a colleague of POCLAD's has worked with township supervisors, local communities, farmers, to prohibit the encroachment, the coming into the area of corporate hog farms. They wanted to keep them out. Thomas Lindsay, this attorney, wrote an ordinance that banned corporate hog farms. And one of the townships is in court. And it changes the whole dialogue. And this case will probably be settled somehow next year, may go up through appeals, and that has to happen. That's a piece of the legal strategy. But the first page of the brief of this collection of corporate, we call them shills, nonprofits, Farm Bureau, whatever, that is sued, the brief pulls out all the stops of these constitutional rights and protections, the First Amendment rights they have, the Fourth, the Fifth, the Commerce Clause, the Contract Clause, the 14th Amendment. And the local people who have historically not been that politically engaged kind of scratch their heads. Well, what do you mean they have rights? What's that about? You mean we can't decide in Belfast Township how we do our farming, how we produce our food? Right. So the whole dialogue has changed.
No, you can't, according to the current system.
And 2 townships, maybe 3 by now,
yeah.
in northwest Pennsylvania, through the same kind of process with Tom Lindsay, have passed binding ordinances saying, in effect, to corporations, you do not have your constitutional rights in this township to override citizen decisions. And it's around toxic sludge. That's how it came up. And the corporations threatened to sue, and they said, you don't have that right here. You can't sue us.
You can't sue.
You know, they're going to eventually, it's going to go up through courts.
Right.
And our side will probably lose, and there's an appeal. But this is part of a legal strategy. It took half a century for a concerted movement building and legal strategy, civil rights movement, to overthrow separate but equal, Plessy versus Ferguson, and that was in Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. So this is long-term work.
Okay. So one of the solutions then is these local ordinances that are binding.
And it creates what we call a crisis of jurisdiction.
Yes.
Because the state of Pennsylvania, the Republican legislature, and it would have been, as you point out, probably Democrats too, went nuts. You can't do this, and they tried to pass a law prohibiting it. And a powerful coalition of local and national, like Sierra Club, United Mine Workers, UAW, so forth, came together, and Tom's group, and exerted enough pressure to defeat the effort to take the teeth out of this. So, you know, the struggle is joined.
Well, that's a wonderful illustration. You know, the mayor of Santa Cruz, which was one of those places that voted against the Patriot Act or something like that, drove up with her husband and sat in a room and watched our Wisdom Council in the Rogue Valley.
Oh, great.
So we're hoping that something happens maybe in Santa Cruz. But on one hand, it's some elected officials on a city council that can make that sort of judgment, but they can be unelected easily by corporate dollars.
Well,
and
less easily on the local level.
Less easily on the local level, but the money can be flooded in, and those people can be replaced, and often are quite easily. But my thought is that if the Wisdom Council were in place in that area, all of a sudden, now it isn't so much the legislator or the city council or whatever that's saying this. It's all of the people of the whole community saying, and you really almost, how do you even pretend you have a democracy if you try and overrule we the people?
It's exactly right. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You pull the curtain back. These aren't bad people, but they're bad Democrats.
I'm still trying to find somebody on planet Earth that thinks corporate values should be at a higher priority than human values, which is, of course, what we do. But
that's another part of the colonization. The competition, the hierarchy. And there are people who say, but if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have investment, you wouldn't have shoes, and you wouldn't have toilet paper or whatever.
Right.
And
well, it's true, and it's true. The way we've structured the system, the key to everything is a job, and if somebody has a good job, now you have less abuse, and you have good education, and you have this and that and the other thing. But a job today can often mean that we're trashing the planet in some way. We're not really serving society. And so we need a more fundamental restructuring so that everybody can be paid and reimbursed for helping society and not necessarily, in some cases, tearing it down, which often happens, I think.
Yeah, we need a whole dialogue or conversation or wisdom councils around what is a society for?
Yes.
And what is security? I would feel much more secure if my health care were guaranteed than if security is defined as a military tromping around the world, making it safe for
Right.
corporate investment.
Right, making it safe for corporate investment and also buying corporate products.
Right.
The real safety, it seems to me, is an atmosphere of trust and respect that we all hang out in, and we enjoy diversity of different people, different religions, different ways of being, and that kind of environment is an anathema to a corporate environment because it doesn't cost any money. There's nobody paying for anything in that environment.
That's right.
And so it really aids the corporate, the bottom line, for us to have distrust in our environment, for us to have oil spills, for us to be in danger. That is more conducive to corporate profits, and that is our system structure.
And the divide and conquer mentality is a whole other piece of the colonization. I mean, the whole concept, for instance, of race, which is an artificial, it's not a scientific construct, it's a social construct, political, came about several centuries ago from the powers that be, who wanted to ensure that natives, white indentured servants and other poor whites, and African slaves did not make common cause. And they certainly had much more in common than, well,
they didn't
we do with the slavocracy.
Right. Let me read your
my
T-shirt.
My T-shirt. I wear my politics.
Slavery is the legal fiction that a person is property. Corporate personhood is the legal fiction that property is a person.
Right. I wear this around my community on Cape Cod, pretty much. I have two, by the way. They do get dirty. And I almost always wear them on errands, and I'm in the post office and printing a lot in my work, because they start interesting conversations and coming back to the wisdom councils where people can certainly find agreement on a wide variety of things. When people ask me what that means, and some people have heard of corporate personhood now.
Yes.
Some of you viewers, I know, have heard the term. But they'll ask me, and I'll briefly explain it. Well, that's not right.
Right.
Now, I may disagree with them or they with me on any number of issues.
Right.
But that's not, intuitively,
right.
That's not right.
Yeah, we sort of start out with the assumption that our system's working and that it's good, and with the democracy that we had a long time ago, we have today, and we sort of kind of begin at that basis. And I imagine when people see your T-shirt or hear you talk, they are at first maybe upset about it. They're maybe like, what are you doing? Why are you being so weird, kind of?
They know I'm weird.
But yeah, if somebody can look again and hear what you're saying and hear what this struggle is about, it makes it's common sense.
Right, even to just start breaking through, turning the head a bit. I wanted to come back to the wisdom councils because I think it's very exciting to be facilitating conversations among people in a non-adversarial way that also gives people exposure to more democratic skills.
Yes.
We call it the democratic arts.
Yes.
And a longtime teacher in public schools, and nobody that I know, including me, taught how to facilitate a meeting that people might want to come back to, or a consensual decision where there aren't winners and losers,
yes.
or how to listen, or how to resolve a conflict. But that's just basic human relations.
That's perfect. Perfect ending. We've got to stop.
Oh.
Mary, I'm sorry we just got started.
Oh,
Mary
it's great to be
Zeppernick
here.
from POCLAD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for your work.